City of Saratoga Springs, special city council meeting to order on Tuesday, August 29th, 2017 at 7:02 p.m. Present tonight I have Councilman Wilden, Councilman McComber, Councilwoman Barch, and Councilman Porter. Councilman McComber, will you offer us an invocation? Councilwoman Barch, will you lead us in our pledge?
Our dear Heavenly Father, as we come before Thee at this time, we're truly grateful for the many blessings that we have received, in particular the opportunity to live in this beautiful city. Heavenly Father, this night we ask a special blessing upon us as a council as we talk with these two gentlemen, that they will be able to express their thoughts clearly, and that we'll be able to understand their thoughts and vision for the future direction, and that we'll be able to make a decision that will benefit the city not only now but into the future. Heavenly Father, we love Thee and we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Will the audience please rise following the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, our agenda item tonight is the appointment for the City Council vacancy. Candidates interview and appointment to fill out the vacancy on the City Council for an interim term starting September 5th, 2017 and end 2020. Mark, is this us, you?
Yes, this is the council. This is where you get to invite the two candidates up and or applicants. I don't know how best to describe it. Applicants, invite them up, let them obviously chat with you, and obviously you get to ask questions. You get to pick who you want to start with, and you certainly can call them back up for other questions, and I'm sure it will make for kind of a interesting evening. Obviously, as staff, we're going to be here and help answer any questions that you all might have, but we won't be directly asking questions in this experience. So if you need any advice, we're here for you.
Councilman Wilden, you have something? Say, do you guys have a preference who we start with, or we can do a coin toss? Okay. Anybody got a coin? Mark, do you got a coin? I know it's the day of credit cards, but they don't flip too well. And by the way, Wilden's social security number is... Okay. It's modern era. You got a coin? Oh, perfect. David, will you check and make sure that's not a loaded coin? Heads? Tails.
Heads, Baldwin, tails, Podesta.
Okay, so what?
Heads or Baldwin.
Heads Baldwin, tails Podesta. That good? It is heads. Okay. She didn't like the result.
Now, you are welcome to stand or to have a seat.
Let's have a seat.
It's on, I think.
If you want to sit down, that'd be better. You make him sit next to me.
All right.
Well, to start, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll turn it over to the council to start asking questions?
Okay. My name is Ryan Bodwin. I've been living in Saratoga Springs for the past 3 years. I am married and I have 3 children. And as I'm sure you've seen from the paperwork there, I have kind of a well-rounded resume. I've lived a lot of places. I've done a lot of different things. I'm a former correctional and police officer. I'm currently working in IT management in Lehigh. And I also received a Fulbright Fellowship, and I have a master's degree in international relations.
Councilwoman Barch, would you like to go first?
Sure, I'll start out. So just some basics. Tell us about your current job status, how long you've been with your employer, what your availability is, excuse me, and what your availability would be on short notice if we had something come up.
Okay. So I've been with my current company for 2.5 years. I was originally hired as an engineer there, and I'm now managing the business critical support team. I work with people across the world in all time zones, so my schedule is very flexible. And on short notice, I can attend any evening meetings. With a couple of days' notice, I can attend any kind of daytime meeting because I can shift my hours around as needed. I have to coordinate with people in Dublin and California and Singapore sometimes, so that's not going to be a problem.
Okay. Well, Councilman McComber.
What do you think is the most critical issue as a council that we're dealing with or face right now, and how would you go about helping to be
The most critical issue facing Saratoga Springs is the extremely rapid rate of growth that we're dealing with and how it's taxing our transportation and water infrastructure. I think that we can learn from the mistakes of Silicon Valley and avoid making some of the same mistakes that they have made by not restricting the supply of housing and allowing public transit infrastructure to naturally grow with the city so that we can keep Saratoga Springs an affordable place to live for one-income households. I think that that's a very important thing to maintain the character of our city.
just to follow up, you mentioned something and it caught my ear. What would you do, or how would you go about limiting property rights to how many homes can be built?
What I'm saying is one of the problems in Silicon Valley is that they have been very restrictive about allowing any new housing to be built whatsoever in the face of massive investment in jobs, which is put at $1.2 million, for example. It gets out of reach of families very quickly. And I want Saratoga Springs to remain an affordable place for families. So I think one of the key things is to make sure that we allow density in a responsible way. I've certainly seen from my own neighborhood, I live in the Summer Village development, some of the issues that come from not doing it correctly. Our roads are too narrow for the number of people who live there, and the parking is always a problem, and when people park on both sides of the street is too narrow to allow emergency vehicles to get places. And I think that it is possible to do density well with proper planning, with making the neighborhoods more walkable, with planning for public transit, with ensuring certain minimum parking standards. And having reviewed the city center master plan, it seems like we already have some very good ideas in motion on that. We're in a very unique situation in that whole area in a much more controlled way than it's historically happened for most cities. I think one of the other keys to help manage the growth well is to encourage the development of Class A office space in this area so that we are not only a bedroom community but also a place that people come to work, so that more people who live in Saratoga Springs can stay and work in Saratoga Springs, and also so we actually use both sides of our transportation infrastructure. If we just have a huge number of people leaving Saratoga Springs in the morning and coming back in the evening, we're only using half of the road space that we have. But if this becomes a hub for the tech jobs that are pervasive throughout Lehigh, we can have people commuting from Eagle Mountain into Saratoga Springs, people who already live here staying here and working here. It's a more efficient way of doing things. And I think that the way that they have the zoning mapped out for the city center plan, I think will be an effective way to do it.
Follow up. You said to incentivize Class A office space. How would you go about doing that?
Well, one of the things that you have to do is to ensure that the zoning plans that we have allow for that kind of thing. I think that it's important that we don't completely, entirely focus on only low density developments. And I think that there are ways, if you, as you're building, as developers come in to build these buildings, if you ensure that the externalities are being considered, how is this going to impact the traffic in the area? Ensuring that they actually have enough parking, that we have enough east-west connections as well as the north-south connections. We can learn from the lessons of Thanksgiving Point. That area, if I get off at 5, sometimes I'll just work another hour just to not deal with the traffic because the east-west connections are so saturated there. If we ensure that there are alternative routes in addition to the ways to the freeway to cross major roads. And
thank you very much.
Okay, Councilman Porter.
We've gotten into some very specific stuff. I'm going to go a little bit broader. I guess we deal with a lot of issues on the council. You know, you can't necessarily, in a setting like this, you know, get your viewpoint on everything that we're going to face in the next 2 years. So what would you, I guess, could you describe for me your guiding principles? How do you make a decision? What things do you base that decision off of?
Well, one thing that's important is to solicit feedback from the community, because as a city councilman, you're representing not only your personal viewpoints, but also the citizens here. I think it's important to make decisions that are based on actual evidence, ideology, and you need to study out the specifics, and you need to consider alternatives. You need to look at how different cities have faced, that have faced similar problems, have chosen to address it. Which of those cities has it worked well? Which way hasn't it? The nice thing is as a municipality like this, there are lots of cities throughout the United States and throughout the world that have faced the kinds of problems that we're facing now, and they've all tried different things. So we can look and see how it's worked out for them.
You talk about feedback from the community. One benefit that we've all had is we had to run for office, and you create a lot of ties to people. You meet people, and they know who you are. You're kind of, you know, if appointed, you'd be coming in kind of short-footed on that aspect of not having been, you know, across the city meeting people and talking to them. So how do you solicit that feedback from they don't always volunteer it?
Well, I think one of the ways that's important is to leverage technology. There's a lot of people in the community that are never going to actually physically come into a city council meeting. But with the internet, with social media engagement, there's a lot of ways to reach people who may not have the time to come here, but still are going to have an opinion about the development. I have done that in my capacity as a leader within the Republican Party. I have a Facebook page for my precinct. I solicit feedback there from the voters in my area. I've reached out to them with phone and automated texts and things to make sure that I understand what their interests are. And while I haven't done a nonpartisan campaign here in the area, I am very involved in the party here, and I already have quite a few contacts and things within the city of Saratoga Springs.
You know, one of the reasons I voted to have you come in is impressive resume. I appreciate that. So, I know you've touched a little bit on this, but maybe you can speak to how your background will translate but being a benefit to representing the residents and the situation.
Well, the primary driver of the growth that we're having here is the growth of tech jobs, the whole Silicon Slopes phenomenon. I'm a manager that's very involved in that particular thing. And also because of my background, I've been a city employee before, though not in the state of Utah. I understand some of the concerns that come from being in a police department. I also understand how you need to make difficult decisions with limited funds to address the most important priorities, and ultimately that you're not always going to be able to make everybody happy. But also, my experience in corrections in particular I find very helpful in my current role as a manager as I deal with escalated customers. One of the things that I learned as a correctional officer is that it's very, very easy to treat people with respect who deserve it, but that when you find people who don't deserve it and you treat them with respect anyway, you can get amazing results in terms of getting people to be more cooperative, in terms of getting to the root of whatever the problem is that they're upset about, rather than just getting into a shouting match.
Other question is, one of the things that I do professionally, I'm always looking for, I don't like the words problems, opportunities for improvement that you can see, and how would you go about, and I know you've already talked about it, maybe some other things, opportunities for improvement in the city, and what you would like to help do to.
I would like to see the recreation programs that we have expanded to reflect the needs of our growing population. The Legacy Center in Lehigh is the only public pool that I'm aware of close by, and it's very packed, and the city of Lehigh is already pushing back on non-residents using their facilities because of how crowded it's become there. I think we need to have our own facilities within the city that can meet those needs, and that we do it in a way that's fiscally responsible and based on real data of projections of use and things, rather than what we.
And direct question, political aspiration. See this as a springboard kind of, maybe what's your thoughts on that?
I see this as a way to work on problems within my own community on a somewhat larger scale. In my capacity as one of the members of my HOA board, I tend to work on some of the tree problems of our particular area. And I'd like to work more on the forest problems and be part of the big picture solution here for this city. This is the first place I've ever bought a home. I intend to stay here for a very long time. I want Saratoga Springs to still be an awesome place to live 20 years from now. So that's why I want to be on the city council.
Councilwoman Barch?
Were you interested in serving us as council members? We not only have our normal council meetings, but we also have various committees and assignments that we serve on. Are there any particular assignments or committees that you see that you would like to serve on, that you think you would be a benefit to the city in doing so? And then to go along with that, what are the strengths that you see that might fill in perceived holes that we have as a council that would lead us?
My interest would be primarily in the transportation side of things. And I'd also like to be involved in the recreation department. I've been an assistant coach here with the city, and so I kind of have some experience of what that is like. And I'd like to be involved in helping to improve those programs and help them scale to meet the growing needs of our community.
And do you know what is your knowledge on how our transportation funding works?
I know that some of the roads are managed by the Utah Department of Transportation, and while we can lobby as a city council, we don't get to dictate to the state how those roads are going to go. Some of them are going to be controlled by county funding, some of them are going to be controlled by city funding, and so it's a cooperative thing that you have to work with the Mountain Land Association of Governments and get everybody on board. It isn't going to help us if we make our own decisions without consulting anyone else, because if we don't link up with Lehigh on how we're going to run the roads and things, then we're not going to be able to solve the general problems that we have with east-west traffic in the county.
And then any strengths that you have in particular that you think would help fill in gaps that we might have in the council currently?
I think my technical background in working with the companies that might be considering coming to Saratoga Springs could be very helpful.
So you're talking more along the lines of economic.
Bringing more of the tech companies here rather than just concentrating them all in Lehigh.
Councilman McComber?
Really appreciate your answers. I'm quite impressed with your understanding of what a city council member would do. I'm also impressed with some of your forward thinking in terms of transportation, other things. That's something that we deal with on a regular basis, and we've had those same conversations about coordinating with Lehigh, et cetera. So that just shows you, I just love that we have such great applicants. Even the ones that didn't even make it to this point, we're still just really great applicants. One of my things, and this goes back to when Mia Love became the U.S. when she was, let's see, she decided not to run for mayor, and then you had to replace her, right? Because we had an empty seat. No, it's not.
She became mayor.
She became mayor. Is when she became mayor, then we had the empty seat. So I made this comment back then as well, and Councilman Weldon was sort of alluding to it as well. I really take very seriously appointments to the city council because it is supposed to be an elected position. And the question was asked, I'll be point blank, are you planning on running in 2 years for the city council to maintain your seat?
I would plan to do that, yes. I think it's important to be accountable to the voters, and I think in that amount of time I will have been able to build a record that people will be able to tell how I'm going to vote, what my priorities are, and then they can ultimately judge whether I'm representing their interests appropriately or not.
Great, thank you. That's all for me.
Councilman Porter?
All right. Talk to me about your views on property rights. I'll get a little more specific because it's kind of a nebulous term. We have to balance, on the city council, we have to balance the rights of landowners who want to develop their land, make a profit, with homeowners that already have bought their house, thinking, knowing from looking at the city plans what was supposed to go in next to them, as well as neighbors who may not see eye to eye on what their property rights entail, how far they extend beyond their property line. So just, I guess, give me some of your thoughts on where do you think the scales lay?
Absolutely crucial that we don't try to change the rules after development is kind of moving, because those developers have made decisions about whether to purchase property based on the rules as they were written when they acquired the property. I don't think it's fair for us to force changes after they've made a significant investment. I think it's important to solicit public feedback, and my point of view is the line is where the externalities are. As we're making these decisions about how we're going to develop the city, we have to consider how those new developments are going to impact their surrounding area. But for those things that are not going to directly impact the other people in the area, we should give the landowners as much freedom as possible to develop the land as they see fit.
You want me to do?
Bark?
What do you see as our city personality or identity?
I think that this city has been a big draw for young families that were seeking for affordable housing. And I think that is reflected in even the library that we have here. We've focused a lot on children's books because that's just the demographic reality of the city. We have a huge population of kids. And I think that that is likely to continue as long as we allow responsible development to continue for a one-income household.
Okay.
How would you keep prices
Yeah,
affordable?
go ahead, go for it.
Sorry, we're thinking the same thing.
Yes, that.
By not actively trying to prevent new developments from being built, by allowing higher density developments to be built in places, parts of the city where that makes sense, where we can account for the traffic and have the transit planned as part of that. Part of the problem in Silicon Valley is it's exclusively single-family housing in a place that has a massive density of jobs. And so people have to commute 3 hours to get to work sometimes. I don't want that to ever be a part of life in Saratoga Springs. I want to make sure that we can still get in and out quickly to our jobs wherever in the area we may be working. I want the prices to remain reasonable because we still are allowing new development to continue.
I'm familiar with Prop 6. How do you balance wanting to have that housing come in and our Prop 6 that the residents passed? Go ahead. Where is it going?
I'm not familiar with Proposition 6.
Back to identity for a second, if I can finish up on that. So one of the things that we see happen, partially because we are a young city, is that people haven't grown up here and it's not their hometown. So back to identity, how do you create an identity for Saratoga Springs? What do you see as that identity and how do you make it our hometown?
I think we need to continue with the community engagement that we've already done. I think Splash Days is a great way to get people from the community together beyond just the normal neighborhood groups that they would normally be working with in their church wards. And think that the ties that they're going to get from going to the schools in Saratoga Springs and the sense of pride that they have in their school will be part of that. But also I think a big part of it is letting the jobs come here so that we're more than just a bedroom community, but we're really a self-contained community that has a lot of different aspects of their life all in one place. I think that will strengthen the sense of place within the residents here, if this is not just the place where they sleep, but also the place where they live, work, and play.
On that one, you mentioned letting the jobs come here. What do you see as the obstacles city has to getting the jobs to come here, or letting the jobs come here, as you put it?
I think part of it is the lack of public transit infrastructure. Currently, we have one bus that runs at rush hour for 2 hours, one direction. Alternative to even a second car for most families. I know for me, if I'm even 30 minutes late at work, I will miss the last bus. And so one of the things that we need to do is to improve that. One of the reasons why Thanksgiving Point has been as successful as it has, and the reason my company chose that site at Thanksgiving Point in particular, was the presence of the Frontrunner train there to allow us to pull talent from both Salt Lake County and Utah County. And if we improve the east-west connections, to Lehigh Station here. It's going to make it much easier for people to justify that.
How do you see doing that?
Mayor and council, we've received a request that you speak directly into your microphones nice and loud, so as to
All right.
better be heard over the internet. Thanks.
How do you bring that transit here?
I think currently at the volumes that we have, by making the 806 route run continuously throughout the day. Obviously, you're going to want to reduce the frequency during the off-peak periods, but it needs to be more than a 2-hour rush hour only bus for it to be a reasonable alternative to driving for most people. I also think that improving the bus service here will go a long way towards helping the air quality problems that we have. As more and more homes get built here without investing in those kinds of alternative transportation options, the air quality is going to get worse and worse with the inversion, and it's going to have a greater impact on the health of our children.
Can I follow up on that?
Please.
So 2 years ago, UTA made a, I'll call it an implicit one-to-one relationship with, if we wanted bus service, we would have to approve a tax increase at the time in the, or was it? Yeah, it was by county, wasn't it?
That was to subsidize.
That was to subsidize the cost of the buses and improving the mass transit in this area. There's also been discussion of maybe a more localized solution where cities would impose this tax and receive the benefits. The cities that approved it would get improved service, and those that didn't wouldn't. Would you be supportive of either a county or city sales tax increase in order to improve mass transit service?
I think that it depends on the general financial state of the city and the county. I'm not familiar enough with the books of the city right now to know whether a tax increase is really necessary. I do think that investing in public transit infrastructure is and I think it's an important thing to do. And if we can do it within our existing financial obligations without raising taxes, then that's preferable to me. But I do think that a tax increase to improve our transportation infrastructure could be appropriate.
Okay.
It's not something we should do lightly.
You got more? I got more, but it was still her turn. I guess I have a couple questions that are, I guess, kind of just deal more with your familiarity with the city council, issues that the city's been facing. How many city council meetings have you either attended or watched on the internet prior to this evening?
I've attended in person 3 city council meetings here, and I've watched, I think, 4 through the YouTube channel. The fact is that I can watch it at a time that works for me rather than only on Tuesday evenings.
Tuesday at 7. No, and that was a big reason why I think many of us were supportive of it, is that convenience, so that's great. Have you ever provided public input either at a city council meeting or via email, and if so, on which topics?
I came here a couple of times because I was concerned about some of the things that have been changing in my neighborhood. One of the things was the change to the way that the lighting fees were assessed per neighborhood. I know previously they had been done per HOA for some of the townhome developments, and then it was being changed to per unit. And I came to the meeting to observe and to understand the rationale, and I felt like the way you guys were handling it was appropriate, and so I felt reassured that things. And so I haven't felt like much is broken in the city, so I haven't been terribly motivated there. I've had a lot more feedback for some of the things going on within the county party, where a lot of things I felt were very broken. And so that's kind of where I had been focused. Really, I think the city has been fairly well managed. That's why I chose not to run during this last cycle, because I saw that you guys were running for re-election, and I felt like there wasn't anything terribly broken in Saratoga Springs. Things were going well. So.
I think that's it for me.
Councilman Wilden? Okay. Barge? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Ryan. Yeah. You want to take a second and tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, my name is Ryan Poduska. Lived in Saratoga for about 9 years. and married, 4 children, age range 12 to 2. And worked at Exactware there at the Point of the Mountain for almost 10 years. Various positions there, currently as an instructional designer. I've also freelanced in various film projects throughout the county, or throughout the state actually. And yeah, enjoy living here in Saratoga.
Okay, we'll start on Barge.
I'm going to start out with same questions. What is your current job status as far as how long you might need for evening meetings, daytime meetings that are out of the normal council schedule?
Sure. Yeah, with my tenure at Exactware, I have large flexibility. They give us the option. With my background in instructional design, also with film and community events, that the committees that I'd be interested in, again, I'm happy to serve in any capacity. But the Urban Design Committee, making sure that the designs coming through are matching the look and feel that we want for Saratoga Springs. Also, community events, creating that culture and that strong connectedness between the residents, I think is very important. So taking part in that as well as the library, I feel that's a huge support to our community, and want to see that continue to grow.
Okay. Councilman McComber.
So it's a little bit of an advantage going second, so it's a good thing we did you can think through your answers. But so obviously, just for those who might be watching, we did ask some questions ahead of time that they answered as part of the application. But I just, for on the record, I just want to have you verbalize, not just when you have the time to sit there and craft the right answer, you know, all of the right, touching on all the key points. But what is the area that you think is the most critical or has the greatest impact on the success of Saratoga Springs, and how would you go about, as a member of the council, help to remedy that?
Yeah, what I kind of see so far within the residents is we have kind of a wide spectrum. We have those on one side that want to keep Saratoga Springs rural. They don't want to see any growth happening. They want to keep it how it was 15 years ago. So they're saying things aren't coming in fast enough. We need to get more stores, more movie theaters, more this and that. Yeah, keep it rural and bringing those things in. And so I see that's possibly causing a division amongst the residents. And so I see that it's crucial in our not only our planning, but in our community events, so that people can start putting faces with names. Because as soon as we are off of email or Facebook and make it more personal, there's more communication and more understanding that goes on between that. So the fact of the matter is Saratoga Springs is going to grow. We're near the point of the mountain, and cities are going to reach their capacities that are surrounding us, and so just by city. So I think it's very important to really drill down into what the residents are meaning by rural, and what they're meaning by growth, so that we can get that vision more solidified. I know we have it in general terms, but what is the look of that? Is it certain height of buildings? Is it the amount of roadways that directs traffic away from the city centers and so forth? So.
Councilman Porter.
I'll go out of order from what I did last time, just to throw you a curveball. How many city council meetings have you attended or watched prior to this evening?
There's about a 3-year period where I attended quite regularly, almost every city council. To begin this spring, I've been our HOA president for the villages Saratoga Springs for about 5 years. It's a very active HOA, as probably you see me here numerous times. But I felt that was very important to represent those residents in our community there in the neighborhoods, make sure that the communication is happening and that understanding is coming from both directions.
Okay, and then as part of that, have you ever provided public input at a city council meeting or via email, and on what topic or topics?
Yes, in our area, since it's south end of Saratoga Springs, we did have numerous well issues, and so coming to discuss that before the council is also with staff about the water pressure issues, what we other issues such as traffic, and also clarifications on code to help educate our neighbors within our area.
Thank you.
Councilman Wilden?
I'll do it out of order as well. Similar question I asked before, but like I said, my background is opportunities for improvement on problems. If you want to call them problems, that's fine. But opportunities for improvement within our city, and how would you go about addressing those, attacking those, and what are some of the, I think some of that's what's the most significant issue, but what are maybe some of the smaller wins?
Is definitely communication and education to the residents. That's one of the things that I noticed while serving the HOA, and also seeing it here in city council meetings, is that due to lack of understanding of the current ordinance or reasoning behind a certain decision, that they'll come and complain about that situation. But as soon as they're educated about what's going on, then I've seen numerous times where they agree with the direction that the council went, or the HOA board, or whatnot. So I think it's important to not only utilize technology, of course that's there, but I don't want to see that as a crutch. I think the human interaction is the strongest point. And so coming from an HOA background, if I was on the council, I would set up regular meetings, or regular dinner meetings, to find out ways that we can improve, and keep that communication open between the two.
Similar, impressed with your resume. How do you see your background? How would that counsel the staff and the residents?
Yeah, with I've worked in the film industry over 15 years now, and in working in that various roles, I've worked my way up into producer positions, where you have to understand the role of each person that's on that film set. And so I equate that to city involvement, HOA, really taking the time to understand everybody's involvement, to where we can see how to maximize the usefulness of their talents and skills. And so one of the things that's along with that is that we also had to entertain the talent, those positions. Found that it goes back to the reasons why we incorporate cities. You know, it's threefold, where the first reason is to provide services, you know, such as safety or sewer, water, roads. Second one is however, is overlooked quite often, and that's community involvement. That we need to create, develop, and maintain a sense of community. Hear residents say that it's not the government's position to entertain us. Well, if they're thinking of the federal government, yes, I agree. Federal government is there just to provide national security, maintain our individual rights, and maintain order and justice. But on a city level, we do have different responsibilities there. And one of those is to create that sense of community. As we have our surrounding cities, you know, we're all traveling out to go to work or to eat or to be entertained. And we come home to a place that we live, but not necessarily what we can call home. Until we create that sense of community where people want to stay here, work, entertain, and raise their families, that sense of community will really become strong. And I believe that's where, as they join together, is what strengthens the country. And so it's a trickle-up effect.
And the other question I asked before, and Councilman Comber regards, do you have political aspirations? And I was intending to ask that before, and I beat around the bush. So, do you have political aspirations, and do you plan on?
Yes, I plan on running, going beyond city council. I don't have much aspirations beyond that.
Okay. Got the order. Councilwoman Barch.
Well, our personality is definitely one of young families at this point. And I think we have such a unique location in the state that's just as unparalleled by any other city in Utah. And so I see our personality as one as a lakeside city, taking advantage of those areas, creating city centers and open gathering places that are near, taking advantage of those views as well as the lake. And I also see it as a personality of fostering that hometown feel, the small town feel, as much as it doesn't take us too long to travel, and all of a sudden we feel like we're in a bigger city, more urban area. And I feel that as it becomes larger in that sense, that identities get lost. I'm seeing that in my current job right now. Since I've been with Exactware for about 10 years, when I started, we're in kind of these trailers, and then we moved into a bigger building, and then to the point of the mountain. During that time, it's grown from 200 employees up to 700 plus, and it's a worldwide company now as well. And during that time, I've seen our culture kind of get lost within our company, and so I see it very important that as we grow, we need to refer back to and hold strong to the visions that we set as a city, so that identity doesn't get lost as we continue to get feedback.
Just to follow up on that, how do you do that? How do you keep that small town feel while we explode to over 100,000 residents?
Yeah, well, a couple ideas that I've had is that one, having our major thoroughfares routed away from gathering places, so that when they are there, it feels it's less noise that they're there. Maybe the height of the buildings, having a maximum there, so they don't feel like they're in a downtown Salt Lake City kind of area. That way it can maintain our views as well. So I think the small town feel comes from kind of the walkabouts, storefronts that you kind of see in the smaller cities on the outskirts of us. And then also, again, fostering that hometown feel.
Okay, Councilman McComber.
So first, what is your stance on density housing in this high density, medium density, low density, Prop 6, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think it's very important that we have all versions of those products. That is planned carefully, so that, as you know, we've seen in numerous councils discussing the feathering method, so that it's not out of place. But yeah, it's very important to have low density all the way up to high density. One of the things that residents really want, or at least that have commented, is that they want more restaurants and they want more amenities and entertainment that comes into our city. We have rooftops. A lot of the restaurants won't even look at a city if it's below a certain number of rooftops. They also want to look at the lunch crowds, and so we need to bring in businesses as well to support those. And so that takes careful planning, but also sticking to the plan and not getting sidetracked by what's the coolest thing down the road. And yeah, I think that's.
So what would you do? I love what I'm hearing from both of you guys about like bring in businesses and bring in, Class A office space and different things like that. So how would you go about doing that? How would you go about getting these businesses? 'Cause we can't force them.
Yeah, well, there's events sponsored by the state and other organizations that I think is very important. their businesses to come to Saratoga. I think it's important during those discussions to really have a vision and a passion for Saratoga Springs, so that they can feel that excitement and come into the city. Another one is transportation. Public transportation, I'd say yes, but I don't think that's a high priority. I know businesses look at that, but just looking at the current business that I'm at, Exactware, we do have a direct bus route from FrontRunner. It doesn't get utilized that much. Out of the 700 employees, there's just a small handful that utilizes that, and so it's really most of the employees are coming from South Salt Lake, from southern Utah County, and they're able to drive there because of the freeways, and so we would have to work with Lehigh City to look at more main thoroughfares. You know, there will be that freeway eventually going in 2100 North that would help bring it down in and with Mountain View Corridor. Unfortunately, that's years away.
Hopefully not as many as
they
say, but yes.
Yeah. And so it would really be just constant communication with UDOT to try to move those up in priority to get those in. I'd like to see if there's ways that the city can, with the road systems, look at trying to do some, not FrontRunner, frontage roads that could start acting as that until those freeways come in. That we have more than just Redwood Road going north and south and going east and west.
Thank you very much.
Councilman Porter.
All right. You've touched on a couple things that have created new questions in my mind. And so, with council's permission, I'd like to ask a question and then maybe have Ryan the first, come back up so he has an opportunity to answer. You talked about attracting businesses. One thing that some, if not all businesses, like to wave in front of cities is, we'll come to your city if we can get tax breaks. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that? Are you flatly opposed to it, and to what degree? Are you willing to turn down a business that would bring 1,000 jobs because they want too much? Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it is important to work with businesses. Just by nature, they're going to want to negotiate, and so yes, I would be open to tax breaks or various things. Of course, if it's going to be detrimental to the residents, then no. But as far as them coming in, the city's going to be making money by them being here, and so by giving them tax breaks or different things that they come to the table with, that we take a look at that and see if it's, one, not hurting the residents, two, it's going to benefit the city.
The other one, I felt like I got an answer from Ryan Bodwin. Through all of the answers he gave, I kind of pieced together. So, but I'd also open it up if he would like to answer it explicitly. He can come back up and answer this one. The role of city government. You touched on this. You talked about how city government has a different role than the federal government does. What are some things that you think our previous mayor liked to say? Is this my job? Was the question she would ask herself before. So what is our job, and what things are our job that you see? And I guess more telling for me is, what are some things, the role of city government, and where's that line of, this is where it stops being something we should be doing and something that we should turn over to somebody else?
Yeah, so to answer the first question, as representatives, that eventually, this is an appointment, but all of you have been elected, and eventually this position is elected as well, is that it's representative government. And so it's very important to keep a pulse on the residents of what they are wanting and needing, because we, of course, will have our own opinions, our own agendas, but we can't let that cloud what needs to be done for the city. Reason for that is that everybody is busy. They have to raise a family, work, and so forth at their time. And they don't have time to study the issues that are at hand, that are on a daily basis, weekly basis. And so that's why we elect representatives that do have the time and the passion, the desire to look into those, and so that they can not only know what the residents want of the city, but also know how to best go about that, because they're spending time in that position. Would you mind second question?
Give me 1, 2, how many other examples you can come up with?
Oh,
I know I'm throwing this at you.
of
What
other
are some
cities?
things that you see cities doing that maybe cities shouldn't be involved in?
Well, there's a good example of just last city council with City of Lehigh, that there's landowners that wanted to come into Saratoga Springs, but because infrastructure was put close or nearby there, they didn't want them to go to Saratoga. They wanted to come in their city for an annexation. And I don't believe it's any city's position to force a landowner to annex into their city, regardless of how much money or infrastructure has been put in. You made a great point about they should have asked the landowners in the first place where they wanted to go, and then they would have saved money on putting that infrastructure in.
I've got more.
Okay. Go back to Councilman Wilburn. We'll redirect after it's over.
Just a follow-up question. My number 1. Brian Bodwin, I'm sorry. He answered. Just wanted to get your thoughts, very specific on Prop 6. What do you think about that? How do we balance that? And I know it was kind of asked in a different question, but I just wanted.
Yeah, it's interesting with Prop 6. When that was passed, there were already densities that were already granted before that. And so I know there's a lot of confusion as those densities are being built. They feel like Prop 6 isn't being followed, but those were already granted and in a way grandfathered in before Prop 6 was passed. So I think it's important to keep that communication open and educating, so that they're aware of what areas have already been granted that density. As far as moving forward, it's difficult. The residents got passed. And so it does need to be adhered to.
You have another question? Okay. Councilwoman Barch.
What strengths do you have that you think might fill needs or things that we're missing here on the council as a group?
That's a tough one, because you guys are a full package, right? My background is unique in the standpoint that at a young age I've lived out of the country. During high school I used to work over in Russia doing construction, and seeing the different way of life there, and the different city structures that they had there as well. That we always joked that once you've seen one, you've seen them all, because it was all during the communism. They just had one way of building apartments, and that's how they did it throughout the whole country. So that aspect, I love good design. I have, again, background in graphic and instructional designing, and I've also served on architectural review committees as well. And I have a passion for good architectural design, and so seeing when good design comes across, I can quickly accept that. When it's not, I feel like I'd have the ability to communicate that to the builders. Again, they have the right within whatever code at the time that they apply to pass anything within that code. But I think a good partnership with the city, and so feedback that we give them that's constructive, I believe that they would try to do that within their budgets as well.
And then I've got one question also for you, and then I'll redirect that to Ryan Goodwin also once we're switched again. So You've served on an HOA board. You're not currently on the board, but how does your role change from being a board member to being on the city council?
Well, I guess the role would change as far as I was elected by a smaller group of residents, and so this is covering a much broader area, wider area. The second would be that it handles a lot more services than an HOA does, and similar in a lot of ways. One being that both provide services, and we find the best way to perform those within budget. We try to find ways to save money. Second is we did community activities, and we try to find ways that would incorporate the different age groups and bring them out in a consistent manner. And the third is local control, and so helping the residents to see that they do have a say, that it's not just, oh, we elect you and then you get to go and do what you want to do. It's really working, and it does take a lot of work, but working to help the residents feel that you have their best interest in mind as you're serving in that position.
And so seems like the appropriate time to ask it again. We talked about how the four of us have gone through an election, had a chance to meet people and kind of create contacts throughout the city. How do you see yourself overcoming that obstacle of maybe not having had that opportunity to create those connections?
Well, when I first started on the HOA board, I was actually appointed on that board as well, until I was elected the following year, or the following year and a half. And so it was a hurdle to some. Some said that, I didn't elect you, I didn't vote for you, so who are you to tell us what we can and cannot do? And so it was really just during that time, it was becoming as educated as I could in the role, the city services, and so that way then I can become a place that they can ask questions and get correct answers, and a ear to that will listen to them.
Councilman Wilden Comber. Okay. You got more?
Yeah.
That was your last one, you said.
No, that was a follow-up on
Oh.
hers.
Okay.
Doesn't count for me.
Well, hurry.
Commit, both of you, to making a meeting by midnight. Councilman Porter, we can't have two.
I'm a jabberbox, I know. I just have two that I asked Ryan Bodwin, and I'd like, just to get your thoughts on these as well. These are more general. Do you consider to be your guiding principles, or what criteria do you use when making a decision?
Yeah, in making a decision, the HOA board and the residents that were active with the board would be able to attest to this, is that I would always put myself in their shoes. That there's times where we disagree on issues, but it doesn't mean that I'm right and they're wrong. It doesn't mean that they're right or I'm wrong. It's just a difference of opinion on what direction needs to go. And I think there's always, there's always validity in someone's concern or their opinion. And so in going, I guess it does fall back on the golden rule. It really just comes down to how would I want to be treated, or how would I want to be spoken to in those situations. The other ones are, the Constitution. We don't deal with the Constitution as much in a local position, but a big amount is land rights, and so in the HOA we had a lot of residents that didn't want developers to come in or build a certain product, and so a lot of the times it was listening to the concerns of the residents, but educating them on the rights of the landowner. And so those are kind of my guiding principles there.
Next question. We've talked about this with the Prop 6 and stuff like that. a little bit, but just what are your views on personal property rights? Where do you think the boundary is between, you know, neighbors' rights, you know, to enjoy their property without being pinched upon versus landowners being able to develop how they see fit versus, you know, just your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's interesting in the standpoint that you have the property rights of each individual that, well, one, they want to maintain their property value. And so when they have a neighbor that decreases that value by aesthetics or whatnot, that those issues are the most difficult because it's eye of the beholder. I don't think it's that standpoint and what doesn't. Ordinances can establish that. But I think our primary role as a city is for safety and services that we provide, and local control and community. But yeah, it's land rights are, you know, you buy the land, it's your land. And if you're going to act lawfully on that property, you should be able to do whatever you want to do. And when it starts getting into the areas where it affects other people's rights because of how your property is mismanaged or whatnot, then that's where I believe the city comes in as a mediator between those.
Thank you.
Does one follow?
It's not me.
Just trying to pontificate you.
Yeah, and this, if the other Ryan chooses to come in. But just hypothetical, what happens in this significant issue that you're outvoted on? After the council meeting ends, what would be your response, next course of action? How would you handle it?
Legally, or?
Personally. I mean, there's nothing legally at that point.
Yeah, no, I think I touched on this a little bit earlier. It's the fact that I admit I'm not always right. There's always room for improvement. There's always areas that I'm not as. I find that sometimes when you scream and shout and argue your point, all of a sudden you realize how wrong you are from that perspective. And so I think it's so important to respect everybody's opinion and how they vote, and knowing that it's not personal the way that they voted, meaning personal against the other council member or the other person. And because they come from different backgrounds, they have different experiences, different knowledge that I don't have, and so I would want to take that experience to self-reflect of why my vote was so different if a majority voted against what I voted.
Okay. Thank you. Ryan Bodwin, you want to come up and recraft a question?
Yeah. Attracting businesses. What are your thoughts on tax incentives, tax rebates, stuff like that? Is that appropriate? And you know, how much? And how do you know how much is too much? Stuff like that.
I think for an issue like that, it's very dangerous because very frequently those types of things turn into a bidding war with all of the other cities in the area, and you bid yourself to the bottom, and then you're not able to benefit from the increased tax base that comes from bringing in these businesses. I do think that in the reality is in the political climate that we have in Utah, some negotiation is going to have to happen there, or they're just going to go to lower tax municipalities and never want to come here. But I think it's absolutely crucial that we keep those focused on the short term, 30 years, like I've seen happen in some municipalities, so that the tax incentives are sort of a way to help them defray their costs of relocation and opening rather than just a permanent entitlement to not pay taxes.
Down the other one.
Let's have another recrafted.
Oh, yeah, it was the.
Sure, he had already answered it.
I'm gotta look back. I'll go ahead and.
You have another one, Councilwoman Barch?
So again, going back to the HOA board, you are currently on the board?
I am currently on my HOA board.
Okay, so two parts then. First of all, how long is your term, and do you plan on trying to be on the board again? if you make it on council?
I currently have 1 year remaining on my term as a member of my HOA board. If I'm chosen to be on the city council, I intend to resign from the board's time. I'll make sure that we appoint someone that I trust before I hand over the reins, but I think it's dangerous to try to do too much, and I'm sure that this is a commitment that will take a lot of time. And also, I want to avoid any potential conflicts of interest.
And that goes to my other question is, how does your role change from an HOA board member to a city council member?
You're addressing problems on a little bit larger scale, but a lot of the same concerns about parking and aesthetics and other things, they're going to apply on the city level as well. But the difference is you're not going to be able to have a personal relationship with very, very many people percentage-wise, right? Like right now in my neighborhood, we only have 76 units. I know most of them. They know me as a person and not just as that guy on the HOA board. And it does make it a little things. I think one of the crucial things as an elected representative is not only to make good informed decisions, but also to interact with the public in not just listening to their feedback, but sometimes they may be against a particular project not because of the merits, but because they don't understand exactly what's going on. Part of your job as a city councilman is to help them to educate and to understand maybe why you made an unpopular vote, so that they have the full context and not just the headline that never really tells the whole story.
It was the role of government. What, you know, the city has to do certain things that maybe, you know, we wouldn't normally ascribe to the federal government or whatever. But what are some examples of things you've seen cities do that you don't necessarily think cities should be involved in, or have you never seen anything, you know, just...
Okay. So one of the amendments to the Constitution that I think is the most important and the most often neglected is the 10th Amendment to the Constitution, which explicitly states that if the Constitution does not delegate that authority to the federal government, that it's reserved to the states. I think it's very important that we make decisions as close to the problem as possible for where it'll still be effective. Some things you really have to address on a national level, like, you know, trade agreements and things. Some things are best addressed on a state level, some things are best addressed on a city level. I think that there are a lot of things that are appropriate for a local city government to do based upon a mandate from their voters that would be very inappropriate for the federal government to get involved in. As far as specific things that I've seen cities do that concern me, in terms of how people have manipulated zoning and planning commission rules to block buildings of things that they have a personal problem with. I know that throughout the United States, that's been used, those kinds of processes have been used to try to prevent the building of LDS temples. I know that happened in Franklin, Tennessee, where when I was living in Tennessee, I was able to see that in action. And also I saw it in the city of Murfreesboro, Tennessee, where people were manipulating those processes to prevent the building of a mosque because they didn't want Muslims moving into their community. I think that is an absolute overreach for any city government. I think that the role of the city is to set the rules by which we'll be developing things, but as long as people are willing to stay within the rules that they've set with the zoning and things, it's not up to us who gets to build what where. We have to establish a uniform set of rules, and sometimes that's going to mean people, but as long as they're following the rules, we shouldn't abuse the processes, just drawing it out as long as possible to make it so expensive that they just end up moving to another city. I think that's unethical.
Thank you.
There, I'll restate that for there is some people watching. Similar question I ended with is, if you were outvoted 3-2 or 1-4 and it was a controversial issue or whatever it may be, how would you handle kind of the aftermath?
This is something that happens quite frequently in my professional role as a member of a management team. You know, we have management meetings, we discuss solutions to problems, we all have our own opinion, sometimes they don't. But ultimately, when the decision is made, it's important for our entire team to be unified in implementing things, not try to sabotage it after the fact to make it unsuccessful just because we didn't think it was a good idea from the beginning. I think that there are times where a more active opposition role might be the right thing to do, but short of a major ethical concern where we're trying to do something illegal, I think part of living in a civilized society is being willing to accept decisions that you don't like, and then trying to make sure that the city is a success anyway, even if it's not necessarily the direction that I would have preferred.
Councilman Comber and I were just talking. If you want to have any closing remarks, and then we'll let Ryan Podeska also have any closing remarks.
Okay. I want our audience within Saratoga Springs to be able to use the skill set that I have to be able to help Saratoga Springs remain a fantastic place to work 20, 30, 40 years from now. And I think that city council engagement is one of the best ways that I can serve my community with the skill set that I have. So I appreciate your consideration for the position. And no matter what happens, I hope that you guys can be successful with helping to improve the city of Saratoga Springs.
Okay, thank you.
I too appreciate this opportunity to speak with you and engage with the questions and concerns as well. Appreciate and to me as a possible applicant as well. One of the main things that I wanted to make clear is that even though this position's available, that it's done on my own merits, meaning that what's best for the city. And because I know what my father's asked, but I made sure that in the application and my resume that it was just strictly about me, my experience, and so I believe that as an HOA president over a large HOA that's during my tenure grew from 500 homes over 700 plus, with numerous developers involved, attending years of city council, working with staff and various projects, and then also my unique backgrounds with design, working with people on one-to-one basis, also working with crews of 40 plus. And I think my personality of the personal touch, I think is always needed within a city council. I look forward to, if given the opportunity, to continue to meet with other HOAs and neighborhoods throughout the city. I know neighborhoods that aren't association. Sometimes they feel a little bit left out just because of how many HOAs we do have. So I think it's important to reach out to those communities as well, to unify us. We see so much division and negativity too much in our lives. So I think this is an opportunity for Saratoga Springs to really shine. I love the memory of helping with the Jacobs Ranch flood. And what that did for our community and brought us together. I hope it doesn't take other disasters to do that. But that's what really excites me about Saratoga Springs is not only the growth that gives us opportunities to reach out to more people and help them feel like they're part of Saratoga Springs as well. And I look forward to that opportunity. Thank you.
Well, a little bit about the process. The 4 council members have a vote. It's by ballot, correct?
Well, the first step is
That's how you guys looking at something.
take a vote. So you take a vote openly.
Okay.
If the vote doesn't result in a majority approving one candidate, or if there's a tie, for instance, the mayor would vote. But if there isn't, well, what it says is a majority of the municipal legislative body, and you are a 6-member city council form of government. The mayor is actually a city council member who votes in the case of a tie.
Sorry,
That's my understanding of the
clarification,
law.
because what you told us before and what process is not that. We were all quite surprised that he did not have a vote. So what changed? Sorry, I just want to know the technical. I don't understand why it changed.
possibly was a miscommunication. Let me take a look at that memo and what I sent. I think maybe the confusion is the mayor is actually a council member. It's a 6-member council form of government. Of course, it's the mayor's a non-voting member unless in the case of a tie. So maybe let me take a quick peek at that and see if there was some sort of a maybe misunderstanding of the memo, or if that is what I communicated to the council.
Well, you research that if the council wants. Can we go to closed session to discuss this?
You may, you just cannot interview the candidates in a closed session.
Fine.
The session, you have to also deliberate openly.
Okay.
So as long as there's a discussion of the same points that you discussed in the closed session, you're welcome to do that.
No.
I don't see anything that says you cannot go in a closed session. You can go in a closed session to discuss.
I don't know. That's why we're asking, because it's all changed since what we originally got.
You have to do both. If you do it in closed session, in discussion.
Character, professional
go,
competency,
yeah.
physical, mental health. Yeah.
I think it's like most closed sessions, or unless I'm wrong, we don't have to repeat verbatim everything we talked about. We just have to say what went behind our decision-making process.
You have to show that there's some deliberation and
That's fine.
I want to make sure we don't do some.
Like I said, it changed, so we thought, well, we'll ask.
And like I said, secondhand side.
I guess I probably misspoke a little bit. And I'm sorry to cut you off there. I probably misspoke a little bit. So you would not be going into the closed session for the purpose of deliberating. You'd be going into the closed session to discuss the character, professional competence, or the physical or mental health of an individual. And then when you come out, then you would deliberate on the merits of the candidates and who you see.
No, we can do it first. Okay. What? Okay. Well, Porter, we'll let you pontificate first.
Great.
Before midnight, please.
So I've got 3 hours. I appreciate both of you and the answers that you gave. I think both of you are extremely well spoken. And I think both of you are extremely competent. I think either of you would be able to fulfill this role admirably. I guess, am I just supposed to talk about things, whatever I feel like talking about? Okay.
We're sitting right there. You guys turn around, he's used to behind your backs.
Ouch. Now we're beating up on me, jeez. The things that I've been thinking about this for the last couple of weeks, just trying to define the criteria that I'm looking for in the person we appoint. And I'm looking for somebody who understands our role, both from a practical standpoint as well as from a, I hate to use the term ideological, but I don't know what other term to, what are the limits we have to place upon ourselves, I guess is what I'm getting at. I'm looking for somebody, unfortunately we're in a position where we're appointing somebody that should be elected by the residents. And so I'm trying to adhere to what the residents, in my understanding, have spoken out about, and the vision that they have for the city. I'm trying to find somebody that mirrors that that desire that they've shown. And I'm trying to honor their decision to elect last election. Now, that doesn't necessarily, just because Ryan is related, doesn't necessarily mean he's the best person. He's different from his dad, you know. So that's not going into my calculations and my decision-making process. But I'm just looking for somebody that is philosophically similar. I think both of you share some similarities and some differences from my understanding of how Bud represented the residents that elected him. And then other criteria that were touched on is, you know, city councils, I've come to realize, are kind of a weird creature, and that we all pull together while we're pulling in separate directions. So, you know, we don't always see eye to eye on things, and we don't always agree. But as was expressed, you know, in the end, we're all hoping for the same success for the city, and so looking for somebody that can work together with us, as well as represent an individual point of view, which is not always as easy as it would seem. So that's kind of the criteria that I'm looking at, and issues that I'm focused on. I'm sure that there are other things that my fellow council members will bring up that will also kind of, as they talk about them, they'll be like, oh, that's a good point. And that's one of the great things about having a number of us up here, is there's always somebody with a better idea than I've got. So I'll leave it there for now.
I too appreciate both of you applying. Really, like I said earlier, all the applicants were fantastic. But both of you proved that the amount of understanding and desire to make Saratoga Springs truly better. Life's just better here is the tagline for the city, for a reason, because it really is. And we want to do everything we can to maintain that. I really appreciate Ryan Podeska for the elephant in the room, obviously, with your father, who I had the honor to serve with longer than any other council member, and then the mayor would as well. And that this is on your merits. And I appreciated that your resume was that way. People who've asked me, I've also said the same thing, that I'm looking at the merits of the candidates and not just who they're related to. Because if that was the case, then we would have a monarchy in our country, right? And we don't have that. And I appreciate getting to know you better, Ryan, as well. And so also, just to the point, both of you mentioned that you would be interested in running in 2 years. I would encourage whoever doesn't to do so, because both of you are very strong candidates, and I think both of you would make great city council members. Request, it's not a demand, it can't be a demand, is that when either one of you, whoever is appointed, does not run as an incumbent, because there is something to be said about you are elected and then you're running off of an election, and just be clear that it was an appointment and now I'm looking to get your vote and represent you. You can see where that would be fair, right, to anyone else who decides to run in 2 years. I think both of you are shaking your head, so that gives me a lot of encouragement that you understand the principle of elections, right? That we don't want to give either of you an unfair advantage over anyone else who maybe didn't run or go to do this today because they're planning on running in 2 years, if you get what I'm coming at. And me personally, one of the reasons why I did not down select either of the other candidates is because they were currently, I didn't think it was appropriate. One, it would look like I'm gaming the system trying to get rid of one of my opponents, and I didn't want that to look that way either. So there's a lot. In politics, it's truly political for a reason, because we are asked to represent a larger group of people represent them. So my biggest thing, and the decision when we get to the vote, I just want you to understand, it really comes down to the density issue. I think that transportation, all of those things really come down to density. I believe that Prop 6 should be upheld. I also believe that there are property rights and grandfathered rights, and so I appreciated you guys outlining those things, and then understanding your basic belief on additional density on top of what might be grandfathered. And that is where I'm probably, I would say that the majority of my decision is based on when I'm talking to residents, and I would agree with Chris, to your point, you're talking to me, get the feel for things. There's lots of things. I think it all comes down, for me personally, comes back to that topic, that foundation that is affecting all of the other aspects that we talked about today. So that is how I'm basing my decision today. So thank you.
Councilwoman Barch?
Thank you to both of you. Although you haven't had the trials of a full campaign and the election, this is nonetheless not an easy thing to put yourself.
To make it more difficult.
Yeah, we did try. We tried really hard to make it harder, but nonetheless, it's not an easy process to put yourself out there and to talk about, you know, your aspirations and your hopes and your dreams and how you think you might help and your strengths and your weaknesses. That's really yes. You've been on YouTube this entire time, so congratulations. You're now television stars.
Yeah. 3 or 3 million. It's bigger than America's Got Talent.
Yes. Oh, 5. Excellent. Excellent.
I'm sorry.
Very good. I want to say that just to kind of start, Ryan Boudwin, I really appreciate your reasoning for not running in the current election and the fact that you do think the city's going in the right direction. I think that was fun, and to hear that you know, obviously those council members that are currently seated are doing their very best for the city and doing well, and I think that was great. I think that each of you has incredible talents that can help this wonderful directions, and I appreciate each of you for those. I think that to be perfectly blunt, I think Brian Podesta has a little bit better view of what our city vision is and who we want to be, and I think you just probably haven't quite made us your hometown yet, possibly, but I also think that you have a lot better grip on the details of the infrastructure than maybe Ryan Podesta has. So it's kind of back and forth on each of you has your strengths, and I really like that both of you could serve very well on this council. I really appreciate that. I think that you both have great demeanor and would be fantastic council members. I really do. So like Councilman McComber, whoever doesn't end up on the council, please run. I think that you could both be a great asset to the city. One of the things in between is kind of your focuses, and again, that's one of the reasons why both could be a great council member. One has much more infrastructure and business type concentrations, I'll say, I guess. And I think the other one has a little bit more current car-based and more activity and town spirit-based feelings. And so it makes it very difficult to choose what would be best to help round out our council and to fill in this current position. So I appreciate both of you, and thank you very much for applying.
Okay. Councilman Wilden.
I'm not known as the chief pontificator here. Similar to what's been said, I really appreciate both of you applying a miserable interview session for you guys. Especially me. But you moving on, you both have fantastic backgrounds and experience, and that's why I supported bringing both of you to a public interview. Is both have different experiences, but both have things that can be very valuable, and I appreciate both of you coming in. And on top of that, for whoever doesn't make it on, in addition to running for council, if the mayor at some point in the future were to consider you for a nomination for advisory board, not board, or planning committee, whatever it may be, that I think each of the city, we always have lots of positions, not always, but quite often they have different avenues to serve, and so for whoever it isn't nominated or not nominated, I'd encourage you to look at the profile and reach When I ran for 4 years ago, Proposition 6 was a very hot topic back then. Number as well, and the residents overwhelmingly passed that. Let's limit high density housing. I appreciated both your answers around, hey, there is a place for all types of housing, which I agree with, but at the same time, we need to make sure we carry out the directive and the will of the people, and that's what I was elected to do 4 years ago that I've stood by. And similar to Councilman McComber's stance, that's kind of where I lean. Not that answers were bad, but I tend to lean with someone who has more familiarity with struggles we've been, not struggles, struggles, adaptions, whatnot, because sometimes it may have made sense to give someone more density to have variety, but we said no, because they didn't have that zoning spoken, and we need to carry out what they voted passed.
Amazing candidates. Actually, we have 4 great candidates, as Councilman McComber said. The council's touched on most of the points I have written down here on my pages. Prop 6, I think, is a big piece. Councilman McComber and I really supported that 4 years ago. The staff and the city council has all worked to uphold the residents' wishes. As it was mentioned, overwhelmingly passed it. So I think that's a big part of what the council's doing. Also planning for the community. We have a lot of input from the community as to the direction they would like to see us go, what they would like to see us become, and we try and follow that very closely. I think both of you being involved with your HOAs and with different commissions, a little concern with willingness to maybe increase taxes for UTA when the residents last election voted it down overwhelmingly in Utah County and in Saratoga Springs especially on that. But you both have amazing strengths. You know, Ryan Bowden, I really like some of your ideas for the business growth here as we continue to move into that arena as a city and build business parks and work with the partners. It's been a long time coming. The council and Mark and Owen over here have put in a lot of work and legwork to get businesses coming along with the council. It's been a long road, so I do appreciate some on that. I don't really have much more to add other than thank you both and entertain a motion. You got something?
If I could, let me point to 3 different sections of code, and I'll let Kevin jump in here as well. I'm just going to kind of frame it for you, and then we can go from there. The first section of code that I want to point to is section 20A 1.510, and it's the midterm vacancies in municipal offices. And this is going back directly to the question. Under section 2 of that, it says, let's jump down here to, this is state code. Again, this is the section of code of dealing with vacancies on a council. And basically, we did this in the sense that, you know, the 2 little I, the 2 individuals having the highest number of votes within the municipal legislative body after a first vote is taken shall appear before the municipal legislative body, and the municipal legislative body shall vote again, which brings us here tonight. Then the very next section, little I 3 times, it says, if neither candidate receives a majority vote of the municipal legislative body at that time, the vacancy shall be filled by lot in the presence of the municipal legislative body. Now, that's what we were largely discussing earlier. What is the legislative body? And if we go back to, I'm going to go to our city code because I think it frankly trumps state code, because you know how I feel about the state. But if you go back to our municipal code, 2.01.01 under our form of government, it refers back to state code 7.1 of the Utah Code. The city of Saratoga Springs operates under the 6-member council form of government, with a city manager appointed by ordinance. So that's what our city code says. Jumping back to state code, Title 10, Chapter 3B, Part 3, Section 302, and this is subsection 1. It says the mayor in a municipality operating under a six-member council form of municipal government is, except as provided in subsection 1B, a non-voting member of the council. Going down to 1B, it says votes as a voting member of the council, little I, on each matter for which there is a tie vote of the other council members present at the council meeting, or, and then it goes on and gives other exceptions. And so in the event of a tie of the council, then the mayor would have the ability to cast a deciding vote. Now, I don't know if you saw me sneak out midway. I had a deck of cards in my my travel bag from when we were recently on vacation, and so we could cast lots if it came to that, but I think going back to municipal code, I actually think that the mayor voting as that last member is the appropriate way in which that should be handled. And Kevin can weigh in on that.
I appreciate the clarity. It just wasn't laid out that way in the email from before.
Right.
So,
Well,
but
and so-
having the clarity today is important.
Yeah.
Yes, and really when it comes down to it, it's one of those things where you say something, you think everyone else is going to interpret it the same way that you said it, right? So when I say a council member, I'm also referring to the mayor because of the six-member form of, which is what we are. And it's not, there's no rules that are different as far as filling a vacancy. Mayor casts the deciding vote in case of a tie. Of course, you'd also have to have a quorum and a majority of the council. If there were only 4 of you here, I guess there couldn't be a tie anyway, but if there were, say for instance,
So I mean, I guess
3,
that's my technical question for you, is I get where you're coming from and I get how you're interpreting it, but when are we ever actually going to have a tie? And when does a law actually ever get cast, if that's truly the case? Because if he's absent, there are only 3 of us. There can't be a tie. If there are the 4 of us and there's a tie, but he votes, then it's not actually a tie. So I guess I just.
Other forms of government,
So-
though, have non-voting mayors no matter what, and so maybe that's
Yeah.
a catch-all for
Maybe
others.
that's
So
what it
so
is.
let
I
me
don't-
continue on.
There's
There's never a tie.
If
and I'm not sure what,
That's why we're asking.
you kind of try to track the legislative history. I don't know how long that.
This is how it
language
goes.
about Casting a lot has been in there. Maybe that's something that the legislature needs to consider updating.
After listening to attorney, either of you want to withdraw?
So if I could, there's 2 other subsections under when the mayor actually casts a vote. And one says when the council is voting on A, whether to appoint or dismiss a municipal manager, which I hope it never comes to, and B, an ordinance that enlarges or restricts the mayor's powers, duties, or functions. And so in those 2 specific cases, the mayor for sure has a vote, as well as in the case of a tie, which they explicitly state in this section.
I mean, personally, I'm great with mayor having a vote. I think that that's appropriate. I was rather, we talked about this, right? When we found out, we're like, really? He doesn't get a vote? Are you kidding me? So I'm actually fine with that.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of, when things change, it kind of goes, yeah.
Well, in this case, it's only in the event of a tie. So it defaults to what the normal rule is.
With that long-winded legal explanation, I will, me and my split personality will entertain a motion.
Mayor, I would move that we go to a vote by ballot per state code.
I'll second that motion.
I have a first from Councilwoman Bartz, a second from Councilwoman Comber. Do I have any other discussion? Porter?
Aye.
Bartz?
Aye.
Comber?
Aye.
Wilden?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Do you have little papers for us?
There they are.
Well, it sort of seems a little appropriate. I'm leaning over waiting for his pen as he's trying to vote.
I've been looking at it.
Yeah.
So if they tie, do we re-vote everybody? With me included?
That's how you do it. If you had 3, no, if you had 3 people, if I was missing. If you
my dad teaching math said I would never use. Just kidding.
That's how you
Yeah. Okay.
because we don't want to see through them like the ballots that's mailed by the county.
Hey, they save money on that paper.
Did you notice that? That on the ballot, like if you put it down, you can actually see the paper who people voted for on the county ballot.
Did you also notice that every single
Anything else with the motion? Member?
Appoint him, we were gonna swear him in that night as well, so, tonight, you have appointment to fill the vacancy for the interim position starting then. So interview and appointment is on the agenda, so I would say do that, and then we can have the swearing in before council meeting at our next meeting.
Okay. Then I will entertain a motion.
I move that we appoint Ryan Podeska to the Saratoga Springs City Council, interim term starting September 5th, 2017, ending January 6th, 2020.
It's crazy.
I'll second.
I have a first from Councilman Porter and first from Councilman Porter, second from Porter.
Aye.
Arch.
Aye.
McComber.
Aye.
Wilden.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Appreciate your time, gentlemen. That was longer than Title 19 often is.
Mayor and council, we do have a need to go into closed session for the items listed below.
Sorry. I will
Make
entertain a
that
motion.
movement.
I have a first
Motion, sorry.
from Wilden. I have a hissing second. I have a second from Councilman McComber. All in favor?
Aye.
I was just teasing you.